All right, January 5th, 2021. Happy Tuesday to you. I'm meteorologist Brian McClure. Figured I'd give you a video update. It's been a long time since I've done one, partially because of the holidays, partially because the weather's been kind of quiet. Really, the big headline, at least for Florida and the southeastern United States, is that it's been kind of a chilly to a coolish start to the winter season. December was below average across the southeast in Florida. And now here we are in January. And although we did have those few days right around New Year's where it did get warm across the deep south, now we're right back to a cooler pattern again. What I'm looking at right now is an interesting pattern as we head deeper into January. I think you're going to start hearing from meteorologists over the course of the next 5 to 7 days that, hey, heads up, there could be colder air in the Eastern U.S., and potential for more snowstorms coming down the pipeline, at least on the larger scale pattern. Again, I can't get too specific right now. It's hard to tell more than past about 5 to 7 days what's going to happen, but the larger scale patterns are definitely kind of yelling at me going, hey, heads up, it's looking kind of interesting. Let's start with a basic chart here. What I'm looking at is just almost like a guess of snowfall totals if you were to take this a whole 2 weeks out, okay? And what you'll notice is the typical, a lot of snow in the northwest and western U.S. and the higher elevations, no big deal there. Typical snow across the upper Midwest. But what I really want you to hone in on and kind of focus in on is notice this swath of snow. Now, does that mean it's going to play out exactly like that? No, of course not. But computer models, I say this a lot, they're meant to be guidance. And as meteorologists, what we're supposed to do is we're essentially supposed to take that guidance and then go, that seems to be hinting at something. Well, when you see this amount and large swath of snowfall start to break out on a 2-week model guidance, you kind of go, wonder what it's pointing at. Well, it's obviously pointing at cold air intrusions coming down into the south and then moisture coming up to meet it, so potential snow across the deep south, southeastern, and mid-Atlantic states, and potentially the northeast too. However, that's a big question mark right now, how much and how the weather systems, what track they'll take, and how it will play out. Let me show you what I'm looking at in the wintertime. It's kind of like hurricane forecast. You might be wondering, now, why is a meteorologist in Florida looking at cold weather patterns? Well, remember, I didn't work in Florida my whole life. And as a meteorologist, we have to study global weather patterns, not just local scale. So I don't just research tropical, but in a roundabout way, tropical is kind of like synoptic scale winter forecasting also. What I mean by that is we still have to look around the globe and see circulation patterns and oscillations. And teleconnection patterns is probably the best way to put it. In other words, what are winds doing on the other side of the globe that could eventually affect our side of the globe? That kind of thing, okay? So let me show you what I was looking at here as we moved into December. And if you live anywhere across the southeastern United States, and really anywhere in the east, but specifically, especially the southeast and Florida, you probably noticed that in December it got pretty cool, actually. Well, here's the reason why. It's something called the North Atlantic Oscillation. And I've talked about this in years past. In November, and really going from October into November, it was in the positive category. See it right there? And then it dropped off into the negative category into December. And now it seems to be dropping off again here going into January. Notice there was a brief uptick. And that was that warmer period that we saw there for about 3 or 4 days, right around New Year's. Well, go out the next 7-day forecast and you'll notice the trend towards colder right there, or negative numbers. And then you go 10-day forecast, same thing. Notice negative numbers. Basically, all you need to know, you don't need to know the specifics of this, but essentially when you look at the North Atlantic Oscillation, in the eastern United States, we look at those numbers as when they go negative, that usually means a colder pattern for the eastern U.S., and it can mean a snowier pattern, especially in January and February. It just really depends then on how much moisture and storm tracks we can get to therefore then give us where the snow will be and how much snow. And if you're wondering, well, yeah, but that's just the GFS model, what about the others? Well, just like in tropical forecasts, when I tell you, hey, I like to look for, consensus, it's not just about the GFS, but what about the European? If you look at all the forecasts put together, you'll start to see a trend. And you'll start to notice that they're picking up on negative numbers right in here. See, again, kind of the negative territory. And when I say negative, I do not mean negative as in a bad thing. I mean negative as in positive versus negative numbers. And again, it's just an oscillation teleconnection pattern. When it goes negative, it tells meteorologists and scientists in the eastern United States, heads up, we're seeing a circulation pattern that is headed towards a colder pattern. Okay. So then what we do is we start to take that and we start to look at where low pressure areas are, where high pressure areas are, and what they might do moving forward. This is a classic 500 millibar height pattern. And just to kind of give you some background really briefly, I don't want to go too much into this because it can get confusing. But 500 millibars is essentially another way of saying the middle of the atmosphere. If 1,000 millibars is on the ground and 0, let's just pretend like it's at the top of the atmosphere, even though it fluctuates day to day, but let's just say 0 to 1,000. 500 is kind of the middle. So most meteorologists like to look at 500 millibar maps, and we call them height maps. And that's just essentially between about 15 to 20,000 feet high in the sky. And we like to look for things like where are your low pressure areas, like for example, right there off the coast of Alaska. Well, this morning, there just happens to be lower pressure right there moving across the southern Appalachians. And by the way, there is a little bit of snow mixed in there in North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia area. That's going to scoot right out into the Atlantic. And then you'll notice there's kind of a big high pressure right here. Well, most of the past couple weeks, it's been cool in the upper Midwest and the Northeast, but it hasn't been what I would call Arctic cold. So it's been what I'd call a seasonably cool few weeks for the Northeastern, upper Midwest, Great Lakes area, but not terribly cold. So when we look at maps like this, we're not just looking for temperature patterns, we're looking for high and low pressure patterns, we're looking for maybe even potential for where will weather systems be. So let's take this forward, and you'll notice yet again another weather system right here dropping through the southeastern U.S. You notice, though, there still is a pretty big chunk of high pressure across eastern Canada and the upper Midwest. Again, that's not really conducive for tons of Arctic air. It almost acts like a fence. And it says, no, I'm going to keep the Arctic air away from here. But these little weather systems can still drop through the southeast, and they still can contain some snow. It's cold enough, and they can also bring cooler air down to Florida. And that is what's been happening. So if you ask a Midwesterner or a person in, the Great Lakes, they'd say, it's been cool, but it hasn't been that cold by their standards. But you ask somebody from Florida or the Southeast, hey, has it been cool? And they'll go, yeah, it has been. It's been a cool December and early January. Well, this is why. These little weather systems keep skirting through the Southeast like that. And sure enough, look at that. By about Sunday, here comes another one. There it is right there. And so again, notice it's kind of dropping down through the southeast. It can produce a lot of rain. They don't tend to produce a whole lot of snow in the south, but they can, again, if it's cold enough. And especially along the Appalachian chain is where they produce most of the snow. Ski resorts are loving this pattern, by the way. But let's move forward to the larger scale negative NAO pattern that I was referring to. Again, about a week to 2 weeks out. So let's go further out. And what I want you to start to notice is instead of just weather systems scooting through the deep south, you start to pick up on this feature. See that? So now all of a sudden there's a big low pressure area starting to show up in the eastern part of Canada and up there where there can be some really cold Arctic air. Well, that is kind of the beginning signs of potentially, it's not a guarantee, just like tropical weather a week and 2 weeks out, you can't guarantee it, but you can see some hints and some signs. It's kind of the beginning sign of something changing. Look at this. Now all of a sudden you're like, whoa, that's a lot more of a big lower pressure area and potentially much colder air into the entire eastern U.S. and eastern Canada. Sure enough, we go further out, and wow, look at that pattern, okay? So this is a pattern that would be very conducive for lots of low pressure areas in the eastern U.S., cold air in the eastern U.S., and these storm systems continuing to ride right across like that. And if we go further out, I mean, we're talking like mid to late January. Look at that pattern. Wow. Now, again, that's not a guarantee that will happen, but this is all kind of a hint of what might happen. So let's go over and actually look at the temperatures. No need to get too specific here, but generally speaking, wherever you see these colors here, this is essentially saying, hey, this is some pretty chilly air. So again, it's not that it's not cold in the upper Midwest and Great Lakes, just for their standards, it's not Arctic air. But you can kind of see the cooler air this morning dropping into the southeast. Here you can see some cooler air coming into the northwestern U.S. And of course, the really cold stuff, you see these pinkish colors around Alaska and right around through northern Canada. Okay, that's your really cold air. Let's pay attention to that. Let's move forward and let's watch that. Okay, doesn't move a whole lot. Over the next 5 to 6 days, kind of stays up there to the north. Now, we keep getting chilly air to drop into the southeast. See, there it is. But it's not Arctic air. Okay, so if you're looking for a change in the pattern, then you start to want to look for, does this ever move? Okay, so let's go farther out in time. And what you start to notice is, okay, right about there, yeah, sure enough, about maybe 8 days from now, it does start to move. There you can see it going across Hudson Bay. Okay, then let's move further out. And okay, now we're starting to see that pattern change I was just referring to. Looks like a classic negative NAO pattern where essentially you get a jet stream that is going way to the north past Alaska in the western U.S. and then way to the south in the eastern U.S. So all this cold air that was bottled up in northern Canada starts diving to the south. This is how you get a really, really cold pattern into the eastern U.S. If this plays out, it probably won't be until about a week and a half to 2 weeks from now. But again, just a heads up, that's kind of what it's looking like. All right, then go from that to a more classic map that you're probably used to seeing, and that is the blue colors on this map indicating some snow. Okay, so there's some snow right along the Appalachian chain this morning. And then the green colors indicating some rain showers. And there they are scooting through the Carolinas this morning. Okay, all that being said, let's go further out in time and look what happens by Thursday into Friday. Weather system going through the southeastern U.S. You see it right there in the southeast? Yep, there it is. Okay, so your low pressure would be right in here. Here's a little bit of snow on the north side. And these are rain showers on the southeastern side. Okay, nothing abnormal there, just kind of a classic storm system. Again, remember we were saying they were moving through the southeast. So there goes one right there. But watch what happens on the backside. There might be just enough cold air for some snow to wrap around on the backside right there through central and western North Carolina. See it right there? So that's where you can get into what I call a messy winter pattern. Not necessarily a bad pattern. Tons of people love snow. Again, the ski resorts love it too. So if you live in the southeast, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and you're a snow lover, this pattern coming up over the next 2 to 3 weeks could be a good pattern for you to potentially see some flakes flying in the sky. Okay, so that's Friday. Doesn't look like a big deal, but again, there could be some snowflakes across central North Carolina. That storm system moves out. It doesn't look like it moves close enough to the coast of the eastern U.S. to be a big snowstorm up here. Notice how it kind of kicks off to the east. So we'll watch that, but that's the way it's looking right now. It looks like it just bumps out in the Atlantic. All right, let's watch the next one. Here it comes. See it dropping down through Texas? And notice, interesting. A little bit more colder air, so there's a little bit more snow involved in that, maybe even all the way down to Louisiana. And there's your low pressure area right there. So what ends up happening is as the colder air builds up here, and as it starts funneling farther south, what you start to get is a pattern where the low pressure areas go farther south, and therefore the snow comes farther south. That's how you can get classic snowstorms across the deep south. See, look at that snow there in Louisiana. It's not a guarantee it'll happen, but it's a hint. It's basically screaming at us saying, hey, heads up. There could be some cold air with the moisture. And then look at that. That's Mississippi. There's Alabama and maybe even northern Georgia. Okay. And by the way, that rain would probably be moving through Florida Sunday night, Monday time frame. And then notice next Monday, again, could be a little bit of snow mixed in across Virginia and North Carolina. See my point? So it's like you keep watching this pattern. It's like, interesting. Yet another storm system. Okay, let's go further out in time. Stays quiet for a few days, and then all of a sudden you start to notice a change. You see right here, a storm system dropping down through the upper Midwest. That would be an Alberta Clipper with snow going through there. And then let's go further out in time. Now we're kind of getting too far out to be too specific, but at least you kind of get an idea of what might happen. And you start to see a low pressure area that develops way far south. I mean, we're talking all the way down in the central Gulf, and moisture streaming north like that. Well, look at all these snow showers breaking out across the upper Midwest, Tennessee Valley, Mid-Atlantic. See that? What's happening is that pattern change I was referring to. This is assuming there's cold air coming down like this, and there's moisture coming up from the south like this. Well, that is a classic recipe for snowstorms and winter storms right here in the Eastern U.S. Will it play out exactly like that? Who knows? Too early to tell. I mean, we're talking 2 weeks out. But you can see how this is hinting at, yet again, maybe some snow there across the Tennessee Valley, North Carolina, Mid-Atlantic. And again, does it scoot out into the Atlantic? Or does it go more towards the northeastern U.S.? If they scoot into the Atlantic, it doesn't produce as much snow across the I-95 corridor in the eastern U.S. If they ride up the coast, it produces these major snowstorms. So it's a fine line. It's kind of like tropical forecasting in a way, in that we can tell you where an idea of a pattern change, kind of like, in tropical weather, we say, hey, heads up, the next 2 weeks is going to be active in the tropics. Well, this is kind of like that. So we can't give you a specific forecast a week and a half, 2 weeks out where the snow will fall. But things like this, yeah, they definitely give us an idea of, something's changing. And it appears as though it's basically saying, hey, it's going to be colder in the eastern U.S. and potentially snowier too. So it's something we're watching. Just figured I'd give you an update on that pattern change that we're seeing here potentially over the next couple weeks. Looks like it could be cold in the eastern U.S. for mid to late January and maybe snowy for some folks.